Hey everybody, you're watching We the Fandom, where we discuss comic books, pop culture, and the fandom experience. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to see more content. How's it going everybody? Jacob here at We the Fandom, and with the release of Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage, I wanted to talk about the origin and history of Carnage, aka Cletus Cassidy, in Marvel Comics. Now I will be repeating some stuff from past videos where I talked about the history of Venom and the symbiotes, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, while accounts of his youth are mostly secondhand, it can be said that Cletus Cassidy had a troubled childhood, to say the least. Supposedly, he was born in the Ravencroft Institute to a mother with paranoid schizophrenia who died shortly after his birth. Afterwards, he would be placed into the custody of a physically abusive old woman who may or may not have been his biological grandmother, though Cletus would eventually kill her by pushing her down a flight of stairs. And if you're wondering why in this image it's a little black girl in the scene, it's because this scene was played out in the mind of another character who was seeing the past of Cletus. Cletus was subsequently sent to live with Roscoe and Louise, who are either foster parents or his biological father and stepmother. While in their care, Cletus tortured and killed his mother's dog. Afterward, Roscoe killed Louise either by accident while beating Cletus or while trying to stop Louise from killing Cletus in retaliation for him killing her dog. Either way, Roscoe was arrested and received no defense from Cletus during his trial, being sentenced to execution. As an orphan, Cassidy was sent to the St. Estes Home for Boys, where he was the target of constant bullying, though he did manage to make one friend, a boy named Billy Benton, who took the blame for a fire Cletus started as a prank. Ultimately, Cletus sent St. Estes Home for Boys ablaze, murdering the disciplinarian administration and the orphans who had bullied him in the process. In his adulthood, Cletus became an infamous cannibalistic serial killer, but he was ultimately arrested and sentenced to 11 consecutive terms at Ryker's Island prison. At some point into his sentence, he would get a new cellmate in the form of Eddie Brock, who was the former host of an extraterrestrial symbiote once bonded to Spider-Man, having been separated from it during a battle with Spider-Man and the supervillain Sticks and Stone. Cletus dismissed Brock's claims of being Venom as ridiculous, and that the idea that the symbiote would return for him was just a delusion, and he spent his time attempting to convert Brock to his nihilistic and homicidal philosophy on life, which is, even the average person could commit murder if only he has the courage. Brock was disgusted by Cassidy's worldview and quickly developed an antagonistic relationship with his cellmate, brutally beating him on multiple occasions. Fed up with his cellmate's disdain towards him, Cletus decided to murder Eddie using a shiv he'd created, but before he could do so, the Venom symbiote entered their cell through the window and bonded to Brock, giving him the ability to break out. Unknown to Brock, the symbiote was actually pregnant and gave birth during the rescue. Left behind in the midst of the riot that ensued, the symbiote spawn bonded with Cassidy, entering his bloodstream through a cut on his hand and bonding with him. Now even more powerful than Spider-Man and Venom combined, Cassidy dubbed himself Carnage and made his escape, intent on using his newfound power to disseminate his lethal doctrine. Embarking on a citywide killing spree, Carnage was confronted by Spider-Man. However, the Wallcrawler's abilities were insufficient to subdue the serial killer, forcing Spider-Man to enlist the aid of the Fantastic Four. He also sought the assistance of another, more dangerous ally in Venom. Venom was reluctant to ally with Spider-Man, but because he hated Cassidy even more, he agreed to help. Facing in the combined might of Spider-Man and Venom, Carnage was captured and his symbiote seemingly destroyed. He was imprisoned first at the Vault, followed by his birthplace, the Ravencroft Institute. He was able to escape at one point, however, Cassidy's bloodthirsty endeavors ultimately culminated with his return to Ravencroft. Now, there was a doctor at Ravencroft named Ashley Kafka, who hoped to find a cure for his madness, and when drawing blood from Cassidy, it actually enabled him to transform into Carnage, because the Carnage symbiote had actually fused with him on a metabolic level. He would go on to break out and recruit an army of psychopathic supervillains, including Shriek, Demogoblin, Carrion, and Doppelganger, to take over New York City. He also drove ordinary New Yorkers to attack each other by having Shriek use her psychic abilities. Carnage and his allies were ultimately driven back by Spider-Man, Venom, and a number of superheroes and anti-heroes, with Carnage and Shriek being remanded to Ravencroft. While contained in a specialized Supermax cell in the Manhattan Correctional Facility, Cletus Cassidy was attacked by Venom, who ripped the Carnage symbiote from his body and devoured it. Without the symbiote, Cassidy attempted to reassume the Carnage persona by covering himself in red paint and continuing his killing sprees, claiming that he still possessed at least some of Carnage's strength and convinced that he only needed to kill Spider-Man and Venom to regain his symbiote. Spider-Man, of course, easily defeated him in a fight, and he was sent back to prison. While in prison, he would be guided by remnants of the Carnage symbiote within his body, causing Cassidy to travel to the Negative Zone, where he struck an alliance with a being named Blastar, who is the king of a planet within the Negative Zone, offering to aid his conquest of Earth. Cletus, while there, found a second symbiote that had been sealed away and bonded with it to become Carnage once again, turning on Blastar in an attempt to force him to destroy reality itself. Carnage would end up getting stopped and arrested again by Spider-Man, but this time he actually retained his symbiote. During a battle with Venom, Carnage discovered his symbiote was about to give birth. Feeling threatened by its existence, Carnage attempted to suppress the birth and destroy it. And since I already went over this in my Venom video, I won't get as detailed. However, Venom and Carnage ended up teaming up against the new symbiote who was called Toxin, basically because it was bonded to a police officer and they didn't want a good guy to be a symbiote host. In the end, Venom and Carnage ended up getting defeated by the combined might of Toxin, Spider-Man, and Black Cat. Now imprisoned in the supervillain prison known as the Raft, Carnage participated in the breakout which kicked off the New Avengers storyline, but was grabbed by the Sentry, who flew him into orbit and ripped him in half at the waist. Cletus was thought to have possibly not been inside the symbiote when it was torn apart, but this assumption turned out to be incorrect. Cletus was placed into a dormant state by the Carnage symbiote to keep him alive, though it nearly perished after several months of orbiting Earth. His body crashed into a satellite owned by Hall Industries and was recovered by Michael Hall, a competitor of Tony Stark. Hall proceeded to retrieve Carnage's body from space and separated Cletus from the symbiote. Using the symbiote, Hall created prosthetic limbs and exosuits which responded in the same ways as a symbiote. Cletus was subsequently outfitted with a prosthetic lower body and placed in a containment cell under Hall Industries' corporate headquarters. The Carnage symbiote would eventually reunite with Cletus by taking over Dr. Tanis Nieves, Shriek's psychologist, who had been outfitted with one of the prosthetic arms derived from it after she was caught in an attack. Reunited with both his symbiote and Shriek, Cletus became Carnage once more and battled Iron Man and Spider-Man. When confronted by Hall Industries symbiote soldiers, Cletus was informed by the Carnage symbiote that it had developed the ability to produce and control offshoots of itself as a result of Hall's experimentation. Using this power, Carnage killed and assimilated the suits of the soldiers to become masked Carnage. Meanwhile, Nieves' prosthesis was revealed to be a new spawn of Carnage, which turned her into a new symbiote host called Scorn. Scorn forced Shriek to use her sonic attack on masked Carnage, who was revealed to be simply a construct, the real Carnage having escaped with Doppelganger. Now the next story is one that immediately follows up called Carnage USA, and Cletus is basically directed by his symbiote to go to Doverton, Colorado, where he takes over their population using offshoots of his symbiote, proclaiming this city to be the new capital of a new symbiote sovereign state. Some of the Avengers, along with the Thing of the Fantastic Four, arrived to stop him, but were possessed by the symbiote's copies, leaving Spider-Man the only hero standing. Spidey managed to get out from there with the help of the resistance of some of the non-infected citizens of Doverton. When the Mercury team, a squad of symbiote augmented super soldiers, along with Scorn, attacked the zone in search of Carnage, Spider-Man and the Resistance appeared to help them. Venom appeared just in time to save Spider-Man's life from Cletus, but when Scorn used a sonic weapon to sever the bond between Cletus and Carnage, it also affected Venom. This left Cletus facing off against a once again crippled Flash Thompson, while the two rogue symbiotes started fighting using animals. The Avengers and Scorn managed to weaken the Carnage symbiote and destroy Cletus' cybernetic legs using a sonic weapon, while a gorilla with the Venom symbiote took it back to Flash when both of them were fighting. The Carnage symbiote was captured by Scorn, while Cletus was taken into custody in a Quinjet. After his defeat in Colorado, Cletus was put into custody into the Thunderbolts Mountain and his symbiote was seemingly destroyed. While being confined, however, he was contacted by beings of the Microverse, who offered him the Microverse to get a whole new universe to kill in exchange for his services. The symbiote regenerated due to having it integrated itself into him at a cellular level, letting him become Carnage once more, leading to his escape and going to the Microverse, though he was almost stopped by Scarlet Spider, who at this time was a clone of Peter Parker named Kane. Of course, Carnage would end up betraying his new allies in the Microverse, killing most of them, but after defeating Scarlet Spider as well as Venom, he ended up getting captured by the leader of the Microverse, Marquis Radu. The symbiotes of Venom and Carnage were replicated and hybridized to create the powerful army which would destroy the Microverse, but Cletus managed to take control over the symbiotic army and used it to escape the regular universe, though he was finally defeated by the combined efforts of Venom and Scarlet Spider, who used a special weapon given to them by the Enigma Force. After being stung by the Scarlet Spider, Cletus cured his wounds but was left in a catatonic state, meaning that the symbiote was now in full control of his body, although it was put into custody once more and sedated. Carnage would eventually be freed from imprisonment by the Wizard, a Fantastic Four villain who, still thinking Cletus was in control of the symbiote, wanted to make him part of his newest Frightful Four, which is basically an evil counterpart to the Fantastic Four. However, Carnage was unaffected by the Wizard's powers and attacked him, but was stopped by Ulysses Claw. After realizing that Carnage could not be affected by his powers and could not be separated from his host by traditional means since the symbiote was embedded into Cletus' blood, the Wizard began transferring Carnage to a new host by transfusing Cletus' blood into an evil scientist named Carl Malice. Later, the Wizard blew up his secret base with Cassidy still inside, apparently killed. However, Cletus survived the explosion with some major skin burns and was recovered by Superior Spider-Man, who at this point in time was actually Peter Parker's body taken over by the consciousness of Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus. When the Carnage symbiote bonded to the Wizard, Otto decided he could use the symbiote's preference for Cletus in order to make it abandon the Wizard by taking Cassidy to the scene and contain the alien before it could merge with its original host. However, the mission failed, and Cletus became Carnage once more, as the spiderlings failed to contain the symbiote. Carnage rampaged through the scene until Claw, whose sonic body had been dispersed, managed to redirect lightning to Carnage and separate him from Cassidy. Both were taken into custody, and the symbiote managed to basically unlobotomize Cletus Cassidy. Afterwards, Cletus was transferred to a place called Kramer Penitentiary, and while there, he would be attacked on the orders of a psychologist, who basically wanted to become the new host for the Carnage symbiote. The symbiote refused the new host, and returned to Cletus, becoming Carnage once more, and killing the entire staff and prisoners to send the message to the world that Carnage was back. Now, there was an interesting story called Avengers and X-Men Axis, in which the villain Red Skull obtained the brain of the recently deceased Charles Xavier of the X-Men and implanted it in his head, giving him extreme telepathic powers and making him nearly unstoppable. This led to a team-up between the members of the X-Men, Avengers, and even some villains. In their bid to fix the situation, Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, and Doctor Doom thought that if they cast an inversion spell, it would cause the consciousness of Charles Xavier to take over. That doesn't really make sense to me, but it's comic book logic. Now, even though the spell actually worked, it also backfired because the spell affected everyone in the area, turning heroes into villains and vice versa. This led to Carnage operating as a hero for a short time before the spell was eventually reversed, turning him once more into a villain, where he would seek out ways to prove that he was a bad guy once again, leading him to being imprisoned by Sam Alexander, the New Nova. Now, there were some smaller stories involving Carnage that basically led to the Absolute Carnage storyline, where Cletus Cassidy gains his ultimate form, but this includes a story where Carnage gained possession of the Darkhold, an ancient book of dark magic created by the demonic god Chthon. He got a hold of the book after the cult of the Darkhold tried to use him to summon Chthon, but instead ended up just giving Carnage enhanced abilities. Carnage was able to use the Darkhold to summon Chthon, trying to barter greater powers for himself, but failed, mostly due to an anti-symbiote task force made up of Eddie Brock, who was Toxin at this time, as well as John Jameson Manwolf, and members of the FBI, as well as an expert on the Darkhold. The other story revolves around the Poison Hive. The Poisons being an extraterrestrial race from another dimension who found that they could assimilate symbiotes, creating the perfect hosts. The Poison Hive had invaded Earth-616, the main Marvel universe, and one of the Poisons ended up bonding with Cletus Cassidy, promising him greater power. But in reality, the Poison was meant to simply take over Cassidy's mind, though he was able to mostly resist it. His part in that story basically ended when, during a fight with Spider-Man and Venom, he was tossed into space by Venom, who believed him to be dead. After the death of the Poison Queen, Poison Carnage's crystalline exoskeleton and consumed symbiote crumbled to reveal Cletus Cassidy restored to humanity. The remnants of the Carnage symbiote re-emerged to protect Cassidy as he was pulled into Earth's gravity and sent hurtling down to Earth. Cletus crash-landed in the desert and died from his severe injury. The Cult of Knoll, an apocalyptic cult dedicated to worshipping the symbiote god Knoll and led by a corrupted symbiote host Scorn, attacked the convoy transporting Cletus' body to retrieve it, and later stole a sample of the primordial Grendel symbiote from a laboratory. Scorn bonded the piece of the Grendel symbiote to Cletus, intending to turn him into Knoll's new vessel. Reanimated by the primordial symbiote, Cletus was physically connected to the Dark God, fighting against his will for control of his now undead body. Cletus regained his mind after ripping out and consuming the Codex of Scorn, the Codex being the DNA marker within every symbiote host. After which, Cletus decided to help free Knoll and set out to hunt down and consume the codices of the other symbiote hosts, living and deceased. To do so, he assumed leadership of the cult, and he sent them, as well as other infected humans, out to find other symbiote hosts. And Carnage would basically spend a large amount of time traveling across the US, digging up deceased bodies of previous hosts, killing currently living hosts in order to harvest and consume the codices to grow his army. Greatly empowered after harvesting a number of the codices, Cassidy is transformed into Dark Carnage, a 13-foot-tall skeletal monster with Knoll's spiral symbol on its forehead and a white dragon spider emblem on his chest. After obtaining this new form, he would go back to Manhattan in order to mentally torture Eddie Brock, as well as to go after Spider-Man. Noticing that Eddie Brock had a son Dylan with him, Cletus pursued them into the subway and pushed Eddie and Dylan in front of an oncoming train, in mockery of what Eddie had once done to Spider-Man. The Venom symbiote rebonded to Eddie and derailed the train to save him and Dylan, and Cletus transformed into Dark Carnage, attempting to rip the Venom symbiote off Eddie so that he could absorb it. Eddie managed to incapacitate Dark Carnage by grabbing onto another train rail, exploiting the Carnageized Grendel symbiote's vulnerability to electricity, but Cletus quickly recovered. He would then set his sights on Norman Osborn, another previous symbiote host, as well as the Ravencroft Institute, where he would grow his army once again by infecting many of the inmates. Cletus would next disguise himself as Eddie Brock and attempt to trick Spider-Man in an attempt to gain the final codices that he needed. While he was mostly successful, he decided to go after the Codex of Venom. While he was able to beat Venom without much effort, the Venom symbiote switched to the Incredible Hulk, who was quite formidable, until Carnage ripped the symbiote off of him after forcing him to revert to Bruce Banner. After assimilating the Venom symbiote, Dark Carnage transformed into an even more powerful demonic form resembling Knoll. With the Carnageized Grendel symbiote now powerful enough to free Knoll from his prison, Dark Carnage took off, pursued by Eddie Brock, who had merged some leftover codices to form a new Venom suit. As they fought in midair and on the rooftops, Dark Carnage gloated that he was on the cusp of victory and could see his horde about to kill Eddie's allies, telling Eddie to give up and basically let himself be consumed. Though Carnage would be caught off guard by the sudden arrival of a group of heroes who managed to turn the tables, and he was then tackled through the ground and into a tunnel where Dylan Brock was hiding. Kidnapping Dylan, Dark Carnage mocked Eddie by telling him that he had tricked him into claiming the remaining codices, and that he now faced a decision in which both choices, either letting Dark Carnage kill Dylan or killing Dark Carnage to save Dylan, would lead to Knoll reawakening. Eddie decided to kill him, impaling Dark Carnage before cutting him in half, which resulted in Cletus' corpse falling apart as the merged Grendel and Venom symbiotes left him for Eddie. This of course would awaken Knoll and lead to the King in Black event, which I talk about in my video on Venom, which I will link in the description. Carnage doesn't really take part in that event, though he is alive at that time because his consciousness was preserved within the symbiote hive mind. In terms of his abilities, Carnage has the same abilities as pretty much any other symbiote, to include enhanced strength, speed, agility, rapid healing, though unlike his father Venom, Carnage is far stronger physically, and while Venom can form tendrils from his body, Carnage is able to form actual weapons and projectiles. So yeah, that's the origins, history, and abilities of Carnage. If you guys have any questions about anything regarding Carnage, feel free to post those in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. I'll see you all next time. Bye.